how cool would it be if as a runner, you could do things today that your future self will thank you for down the line. In this video, we're going to talk about the 6 things you can do today as a runner that will pay you back in spades years from now. And Tutu's going to kick us off with the first one.
So like with anything, with running, you get better the more you do it and the more consistently you do it. It's not worth it if you one week run 6 days a week and next week run 2 days a week. Yeah, so you've averaged 3 days a week for 2 weeks, but one of those weeks is a significantly lower amount of work. So the important thing here is that we want you to be going out and running. If you choose 4 days a week, 3 days or 5 days a week, do it week in, week out, show up for your runs. And as you build the consistency, you'll gradually get better and better and stronger. But consistency doesn't just apply to the training you do, it applies to both the recovery aspect of it. So rest, including rest into your training, is part of the process. And being consistent about your rest and recovery from your hard runs is also very important. And also don't forget about your nutrition, the hydration aspects, and your sleep. Sleep is one of the most important aspects of training. You do all of your recovery, and all of your actually getting stronger from your workouts happens in your periods of rest. And sleep is the best part of this. So ensuring that you are consistent with your workouts, your hydration, your nutrition, your sleep and recovery will be much better for you in the long term.
So one of my favorite tools that I have in my running toolbox that you can implement into your training plan now, that you're going to thank yourself for in the future. Future Shona is going to be very grateful for this, is mobility. The thing with mobility is that it's one of those things that you don't really regard as important until such time that it is important, or you realize that you're lacking something, or perhaps feeling a tightness somewhere, or not getting the range of motion that you need for your running. This is one of the things that I find runners just neglect, because you don't necessarily understand straight away that it is going to be important for you. It is, however, one of those things, unlike strength training necessarily, that can have an instantaneous sort of effect. I know from athletes that I've worked with, and Lindsay himself has done a mobility session and literally felt the effects the next day, and has changed the way that they've run. Mobility is so important, because it allows you to have stability around your joints and still be able to move around that. So it's slightly different to flexibility, which is just your muscles' ability to stretch out and come back, right? This takes into account the stability of the joint, so the joint is stable, and your ability to move around that. And that's why I'm such a big advocate of mobility over flexibility. For runners in particular, we take part in a linear sport, right? So just forwards, not really backwards, just forwards. And so we want to ensure that we're getting mobility all around, because it's such a compounding and this continuous linear kind of action, we want to then put in some mobility exercises to allow our bodies to be moving in ways that we don't often allow it to. And this is going to allow you greater range of motion for your running gait and for your performance. It's also going to help just loosen up some muscles and structures that maybe get a little bit tight from running specifically. It's a great aspect to add into your training plan before your runs or after your runs, into your strength sessions, and it's definitely something that you can do every day.
Strength training is very similar to mobility. Whenever you start it, you're going to see benefits. However, the sooner you start, the sooner you will firstly see those benefits. And while we know that strength training becomes critical as we get older, the advantage of starting strength training when you're younger means that you push yourself to a much higher level. And so when that loss of strength starts to happen when we get into our 40s, 50s and 60s, that's going to start off a much higher base. Plus, you are going to be doing strength training at that point because you'll be in the habit, and so that loss will be at a much lower rate. The question we always get is, what strength training? So because we are talking mostly running, we tend to focus on the lower limbs, things like step-ups, things like single leg squats, split squats, side lunges. Those are the type of exercises, but we don't want to ignore the upper body. And so some upper body exercise is also important and part of running. But if you want to know how to do it properly, you can click on the link on the video now. So if you start doing strength training now, you will thank yourself later.
Another thing you should be prioritizing right now, today, is your sleep. If you can prioritize your sleep, being it the quantity of sleep, how many hours you're able to sleep, not just tonight, but over a week span, as well as the quality of your sleep, it is going to have a massive impact on your running Again, probably pretty soon, but certainly many years from now when you're able to be more consistent as a runner. I talk about the quantity first. Quantity of sleep is absolutely key. A lot of people will say, oh, I sleep a couple of hours and that's all I really need. It's not about getting 3 hours a night of sleep and once in the week, on the weekend, you can maybe get a good 8 or 10 hours of sleep in. That unfortunately doesn't do the trick. There's a compounding effect of not getting enough sleep every night, because all it does is it affects tomorrow's training session, tomorrow's work day. Everything you do the next day has a negative effect from getting too little sleep the night before. There's no such thing, unfortunately, when it comes to sleep as catching up on sleep. If you can get 10 hours of sleep on the weekend, it really doesn't make up for the fact that you maybe only slept 2 hours a night for the week leading up to that. So that's the quantity. The quality of sleep is just as important. We refer to something called sleep hygiene. The environment that you're sleeping in should be dark, it should be cool, your bedroom. Try and avoid having any little flashing lights from chargers, television screens, those sort of things. Turn your phone upside down so your phone light doesn't come on in the middle of the night. As much as you don't realize it, all of those have an effect on your sleep quality. We've all heard the blue light as well. Your phones, being on your phones, tablets, mobile devices before you go to sleep. You want to make sure that at least an hour before going to sleep that you are putting any screens down and not getting that blue light. You want to make sure that your room is nice and cool, whether that's a fan, whether that's using an aircon, whatever might work best for you. Not being too hot, not being too cold though. That also does play a massive effect in terms of your sleep quality. And then a lot of people also want silence. So it does vary. Some people I know do like a white noise. Other people need absolute silence. So all of these little aspects come into how good the quality of your sleep is. So quantity and quality, I can tell you now, is going to benefit you years from now if you can get your sleep right.
So let's talk about nutrition. When we are young and strong and fit, we can pretty much put anything in the tank and it's going to keep us going. But having a poor diet, and a poor diet that doesn't match the needs of the exercise that you are doing, can have serious long-term consequences. RED-S, or Relative Energy Deficiency Syndrome, is getting a lot of airtime in the literature at the moment, focusing predominantly on females, but it's equally a problem in high training male athletes. And in short, it means that you aren't providing the body with the fuel that it needs to support your training. And the impacts of it are often only felt months and even years down the line. And then it is very difficult to undo the damage. You can have endocrine dysfunction, which effectively means that your hormones can't regulate the processes in your body that they need to regulate. Stress fractures can become a real chronic issue that as you recover from one, you go straight into another one. And then very important for performance is that it can impact on your iron levels, which then impact your hemoglobin and importantly red blood cells. And then you cannot get the oxygen to the working muscles that you need. And it basically feels like you're trying to exercise at very high altitude all the time. So you need to put a focus on your nutrition, make sure you're eating properly, and make sure that you are getting enough calories to drive the exercise that you are doing.
Something else that is really, really important that your future self will thank you for is how you progress in your plan. So progression, slow progression, like gradually over time, is always going to be more beneficial than a quick progression and getting those quick results, those instantaneous results, because when we build up slowly and gradually, those physiological changes hang around for a lot longer. Essentially, think about something like a crash diet, right? You if you try to manage your weight, you do this crash diet, cool, you lose a whole bunch of weight, and then all of a sudden you go back to the way you used to, and you've picked up probably even double that weight. Similar principles apply here. We want to elicit physiological change so that it stays with us for a longer period of time. Most physiological change, in specific when we're talking to endurance or strength, takes around 6 to 8 weeks to start happening in the body. And so we want to make sure that we're building up nice and slowly, and so that change hangs around. When we're talking endurance, I often like to refer to building your endurance engine. And we want to build this engine slowly over time, and then slowly add a little bit of a turbo in there, as opposed to just quickly building the engine. It lasts you for a year and then it falls apart. Really focusing on all those nuts and bolts and putting the pieces all together so that you have a strong structure to sustain you for as long as you want to be active.
So we've discussed the theory about what you should be doing now that the future you will thank you for. But if you don't do these 4 things, you are going to struggle to actually put it into practice.